What if King Lion was right about Green Lantern?
Green Lantern fans are arguing right now over a 2-minute trailer. Not a full episode, not a full story, a teaser. And somehow we've already decided what's accurate and what's wrong. Now the biggest complaint I keep seeing is this. Where is the green? Why doesn't the suit look right? And I get it. If you grew up watching a version like Green Lantern the animated series or adaptations, you expect a certain look, right? But here's the problem. That's not the only version of Green Lantern. This whole debate really started when a creator began reacting to the new direction from James Gunn. He already said he's pulling inspiration directly from the comics, not just cartoons, not just older movies, straight from the comics. And that's where things start to clash because most people weren't introduced to Green Lantern through the comics. So instead of arguing opinions, what I'm going to do in this series is simple. I'm going to show you the actual material sources, comic by comic, example by example, receipt by receipt. No assumptions, no guessing, just straight to the facts. Because here's the truth a lot of people don't realize. Green Lantern has never had one fixed look. Not one fixed suit, not one fixed aura, not even one fixed way the ring works. The version you remembered is a version, not the version. At the center of all this is the power ring. That ring doesn't follow strict visual rules. It's powered by willpower, imagination, and focus. Which means what you see can change depending on user, the story, and the writer. So over the next few parts, we're going to break it down. Why the suit doesn't always look the same, why Green Lantern's aura isn't always visible, and why what you saw in the trailer might actually be more accurate than you think. And just to be clear, this isn't about calling anyone wrong. If you grew up with a certain version of Green Lantern, that's valid. But there's a difference between what we're used to and what's actually been established in the comics. So before we say something isn't accurate, let's actually look at the history behind it. Because once you see the receipts, this whole conversation starts looking very different. There's claims going around about King Lion, but nobody is showing the clip. So what was actually said? This is where the Green Lantern conversation stopped being about the suit and start being about something that never was actually said. So before everything got messy, this actually started with a different critique. A creator named Soups shared that he didn't really like the Green Lantern trailer. And his criticism mainly came from not being very familiar with the deeper comic lore. That's when King Lion stepped in. He responded by explaining that a lot of the fans and even content creators are basing their opinions on limited versions of Green Lantern. Mostly cartoons, movies, not the comics themselves. Or alluding that they have limited information about the comics. And to be fair, that's how a lot of people were introduced to the character. But then another creator enters the conversation, the Red Prime. He reacts to Lion's video and says, the show looks good, but where's the green? And even claims that the suit looks brown. Not at this point, we still have a normal disagreement, right? One person's talking about the comic accuracy, the other one's talking about how it looks to them. But then the conversation takes a turn. A claim started spreading that King Lion was calling people or I had to censor it for TikTok guidelines reasons.
I'm here to stay on the defensive for a bit. To sum up what King Lion said about me, he just called me childish, sensitive, and ill-informed, which I found to be offensive and rude.
Around you who have different opinions than you. Because it's not nice to call people for thinking one way that you don't, especially when theirs is just as justified as yours.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful. I didn't call anybody an See, in all my Lantern videos, I didn't call anybody I didn't call nobody an I just said that we should use common sense, think for ourselves, and to not allow other people dictate how you feel about something without forming your own opinion. Matter of fact, I'm sorry. What did you show in your video that I said?
Instead of actually watching the trailer and, dissecting it so you can form your own opinion, a lot of you seem to have just watched what somebody else said, and then you just automatically went with it. You didn't even attempt to dissect it for yourself and think, which is something that all people should be able to do. No.
So at no point did I call anybody Me saying think, use a little common sense. That way, you can form your own opinion. Me saying that somehow registered in your brain as me being hostile and calling you guys cool. So, you know what? Let's just do it this way. First things first, your complaints are silly. Oops, let me stop. That might be a trigger word for you. Let me try something else. Your complaints come from a place of you being ill-informed. Because of that, how you feel about the trailer can come off as childish.
And this is where things got important. There's no clip, no quote, and no timestamp. No actual evidence that he said that. What he did say was that people weren't really stopping to think about the comic material being referenced, especially with James Gunn pulling inspiration from different runs. That's not an insult, it's technically a critique on your video. But somewhere along the line, you didn't think about it turn into your and those are not the same thing. This is where the conversation shifts from facts to interpretation, from what was said to how did it feel. And while all this is happening, the original conversation about Green Lantern gets completely lost. So now we're not debating the suit anymore, we're debating a version of a conversation that never actually happened.
Did Green Lantern really need his ring?
Or even a green suit to be a hero? You might be surprised on how the comics have always answered this question. Alright, let's stop guessing and actually go to the comics. Because if you think Green Lantern has to wear a glowing green suit, Green Lantern Earth 1 completely breaks that idea. This is one of the clearest modern representations of Green Lantern, and it does something very important. It strips the character down to the core. Through Volume 1 and Volume 2, Hal Jordan does not wear the traditional green suit people expect. His primary look is a white and black suit. Not glowing green, not the classic design. There's even a moment where he's undercover as a prisoner. And he doesn't even have the full suit on. Just the symbol itself appearing on his chest. With the green aura. No full costume, no traditional look. And by the end of Volume 2, he's wearing an all-black suit. Still no classic green uniform. So what does that tell us as the reader? That the suit isn't the defining factor. Now let's talk about the green aura. Yes, it does appear throughout the comic, but there are panels where you would expect to see it, and it's just not there. So what does that mean? There are really only two possibilities. A visual inconsistency, or it's intentional, to show that the aura is a manifestation, not a consistent rule. And this is where the story really hits, because this version of Green Lantern isn't about the suit itself. It's about the person wearing the ring itself. You don't need a green suit to be in Green Lantern. It's the man that makes the suit, not the suit that makes the man. You know what I mean? The symbol is what matters in the story. So when people look at a trailer and say, that doesn't look like Green Lantern, they're thinking of one version. But the comics? They've already shown us there's more than one way to be a Green Lantern. You're not gonna believe me when I say this, but Green Lantern's green aura is not really there. Okay, I'm pretty sure I got a reply now from people saying, well, he did have a green aura. Alright, y'all said, where's the green aura? So I did what any reasonable person would do. I went back to 1959. Now let's jump to Green Lantern issue number 1. So right away, we see Hal flying through space, right? And the comic literally tells us that his ring creates an air pocket so he can breathe in outer space. Cool, right? But here's the funny part. You don't really see a big green aura like people expect. So let me get this straight. He's in space, not suffocating, but we're worried about the glow itself. What this shows us is simple. The aura is doing a job, but not putting on a light show. It's a function of the ring, not a decorative spectacle. And guess what? The aura is still not everywhere, but it is present. At this point, I'm flipping pages like, did they forget to turn it on sometimes? Or was it always there? But on a serious note, you mostly see it in space. You see it when it's needed, but not when you're walking around or fighting, no consistent glow. If we go to Green Lantern issue number 2, this is where things get interesting. When he charges his ring for a 24-hour charge, you see the aura around it as it charges. Okay, cool, that makes sense of course, right? When he goes back into space, you see it again. But then, after that, it's gone again. It's simple as that. And this is my favorite part. He gets trapped in frozen ice, can't even escape. So what does he do? Creates a mini sun. It does not require an aura, it does not require a bubble, just the power of the ring itself. Now we move to Green Lantern issue number 3. Here's where people get a little bit confused. Shield moment. You see what looks like a green aura, but it's actually a shield, a construct. So let's put this all together from the very beginning. The original Green Lantern did not have a consistent green aura. The glow isn't the power. The ring is. Read this panel with me. My ring, obeying my willpower, has formed an invulnerable pocket of air around me to enable me to breathe until I get to that star system the lantern voice told about. It's not him having an aura, it's the ring that does it. Once you break that down to its core, a lot of this makes sense. Alright, so we looked at the origin, right? We've looked at the modern comics. And some people are still like, yeah, but that's only one version. Okay, let's talk about multiple versions. Let's have fun with this. Let's take a look at some other Green Lantern comics. I went through random Green Lantern comics through the years, through the writers, and different eras. Ya estuvo. And I just asked one simple question. Is there any consistency with the aura or the suit? Let's start with Green Lantern, Green Arrow, issue number 87. This is where John Stewart became Green Lantern. So Hal Jordan gives him the ring, and you actually see the suit being created. There's a green aura around it during that moment, but after the suit is formed, it's gone. So the aura really just showed up. All right, job's done, I'm out, never to be seen again. Now let's go into Green Lantern issue number 55 with Guy Gardner. He's underwater, he's trying to save a submarine, right? And yeah, you can see the green aura around him, but then in another panel, he's still underwater and still doing the same thing, and there is no aura. Again, two different possibilities. So the aura is just optional? Let's just jump forward to 2018 Green Lantern Huckleberry and Hound special issue number 1, the Hanna-Barbera crossover. Modern Green Lantern, right? No aura during the normal scenes, but when they travel, there's like this energy trail behind them. And once they land, gone again. So the aura said, I only do special effects. You kind of get it? I hope you do. Now this one is actually crazy. Absolute Green Lantern. In this version specifically, you have a character with a green aura, but no green suit. And at the same time, you have another lantern with green suit, but no aura. So now it's mix and match at this point, you know? So let's just pause for a second. Let's pause it. We just looked at comics from the 60s, 70s, and modern day. And what do they all have in common? They are completely different in some way or form. The aura shows up sometimes. The suit changes depending on the version. And then within the same comics, it's not always consistent. You know what I mean? And keep in mind, this is like, what, 0.1% even less of Green Lantern's history. And anyone can pick up these comics for a very good price. I picked up this trade paperback of Green Lantern Corp for only close to $5 with 15% off. So it just depends on how passionate are you to read these comics yourself. Even my own comic book shop on Easter was giving away comic books for less than $1 for back issues. Again, do you have the passion to read these comics? There is way more examples than this. So when someone says, that's not accurate, it's not glowing green, or there is no suit that looks green, you're not actually talking about all of Green Lantern. You're talking about one version out of the decades of different interpretations. So at this point, some people might still say, well, Hal Jordan isn't the original Green Lantern. You're right. You're absolutely right. The very first Green Lantern was Alan Scott from All American Comics, issue number 16. And here's where things get interesting. He doesn't even wear a full green suit. There's green, yeah, but it's mixed in with some red and some other minor colors. So even the first one said, we're not doing all green. Now let's talk about the aura in this comic. There are moments where you see green energy around him, like when he's using his power, but then there are moments where it's just not there. He's flying, moving in insane speeds. No consistent glowing aura in some panels, like I said. Even when he's doing things like phasing or walking through objects, the aura shows up when needed and disappears when it's not. You see a pattern here? So let's put this all together. The first Green Lantern didn't have a standard green suit, didn't have a consistent aura. So if the original version didn't follow those rules, then where did this idea come from? It has to look one specific way. Okay, before we move forward, I want to take a moment to address something important. It's not just about Green Lantern, it's about what we interpret creative decisions. A lot of the criticism we're seeing right now, especially around the Green Lantern show, comes from expectations. I should know, I'm a Dragon Ball fan. We have a lot of expectations. Expectations based on a specific version of a character, whether that's animated series, movies, or certain comic runs. But when you look at what James Gunn has actually said about his approach, you start to see a very clear direction. For example, in the interview with The Hollywood Reporter, he stated, "We're not going to make everybody happy every step of the way, but everything we do is going to be about telling the best story." And why does this statement matters? Well, it's a big cue of what his direction is. So this isn't accidental, it's very intentional. He understands not everyone will agree with every decision that people want, but instead of trying to satisfy every expectation, he's choosing to prioritize on narrative. And when you look how Green Lantern series Lanterns is going to be described, it's being framed as a grounded, true detective style story, something closer to reality. That alone tells you the tone is different on purpose. And if you've been following this series, you've already seen that Green Lantern as a concept has never had one fixed visual rule. Like I stated before, different eras, different writers, different interpretations. And now you have a director doing the same thing. And we've already seen this approach with Superman, taking inspiration from stories like All-Star Superman, while introducing characters like Mr. Terrific and Hawkgirl, and Guy Gardner, and even expanding into projects like Creature Commando. This isn't about copying one version. It's about expressing the story itself in their own interpretation. It's about building a version that serves the story he wants to tell. And that brings us to the next part of the conversation. Because once we understand the intent behind the work, we also need to look how we respond to it maturely. This part isn't about attacking anyone. It's about accountability and understanding. I also want to be clear about something. Not everyone processes information the same way. So the goal here is to not overwhelm anyone or not to belittle anyone. It is to explain clearly why certain responses can become across as harmful, big or small. In the conversation, there were moments where language was used that can be seen as dehumanizing, specifically jokes or comments directed at people based on things like color perception, and also using words like to describe people or their perspective on the whole conversation directed towards a person. Even if that's not the intent, the impact of those words can make people feel dismissed or disrespected, especially someone that's very knowledgeable and educating you on this. And once a conversation reaches that point, it stops being about the topic and it starts becoming something more personal. There's an importance between that needs to be understood and not knowing something. It's not the same as being unintelligent. It just means there is information that hasn't been seen yet. And when someone says, you might not have thought about this, or take another look at the source, that's not an attack. That's an invitation to re-examine the information. And this is where response matters. If someone chooses to engage in a conversation, especially publicly on this social media platform, there is an understanding that the response will come back no matter what. And how we respond to those responses is where maturity shows. In this situation, when the conversation started to shift to tone, choosing to step away or block is not avoidance. It's setting a boundary between content creators. And sometimes that's the most responsible thing you can do. They gave us that button for a reason. There will also be moments where unrelated comments were brought in, things that didn't add to the discussion. For example, having to see a person's name that's unrelated to the conversation and your frustrations to them because you're mad at another content creator. You need to learn to let it go. And instead of made this situation more heated. And that's important to recognize. Because there's a difference between contributing and escalating the situation. At the end of the day, we can disagree, we can have different interpretations, but how we communicate those differences matters just as much as the information itself. After everything we just talked about, a lot of you might be thinking, okay, But how do I even start reading comics? Let me make this simple for you. First, if you don't want to spend a lot of money right away, you can use subscriptions. DC Universe Infinite app and Marvel Unlimited app both have offered free trials for 7 days. You can pay $9.99 or sometimes you can pay up to the premium, which is more like around $12 to $14, without even committing after the 7 days. If you want to start buying comics, most standard issues are around $2.99, $3.99, and the more premium ones like variant covers can go up to about $10.99. But here's the best advice I can give you. You only need to pick 3 series. Stick with those for a year. Well, that's about like $12 a month if you buy the basic issues, which is honestly cheaper than most subscriptions we already pay for. And don't forget, there are ways to save money. Free comic book day, holiday discounts, $1 comics. I just got this only for $5 with a 15% markdown at my local comic book shop. Just check your local comic shop or even social media for that. They promote these events all the time. And this is the one people sleep on, your local library. If you have a library card, you can read trade paperbacks for free. No subscription and no cost to you. Just get in your car and take a trip to the library. And this is very important. Don't just rely on people online, including me, for this detail. Pick up the comic yourself. Experience the story yourself. And honestly, this reminds me something LeVar Burton once said. This is the hardest thing I've ever done, and the most rewarding. I love that I am able to focus on my point in my life, on the mission, the continuing mission of getting kids excited about literature and reading. And like he always said, but you don't have to take my word for it. I'll see you guys in the next video. Go read it yourself.